Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are tackling, well, what might be the single most fundamental question in behavioral science. Why do we do what we do?
Joe, what makes us tick?
Exactly. What internal forces, activate, direct, and sustain our behavior? Whether we're signing up for a marathon or just reaching for a glass of water.
We're diving into the science of motivation.
Mm-hmm.
We generally define motivation as those underlying factors that, well, fuel and focus goal-directed behavior.
Right. And the whys are the motives, these needs or wants.
Precisely. And because you can't, see a need directly,
Mm-hmm.
we have to infer the motive from the behavior we actually observe.
So our sources today, they really trace the whole evolution of psychological thinking here. How we went from thinking we were, programmed automatons to understanding we're these really complex processors, moving from basic biology all the way up to cognitive appraisal.
It's quite a journey.
It is. So our mission is to uncover those competing theories that try to explain our fundamental drives. Everything from hunger to, well, happiness. Okay, let's unpack this.
So when psychology first started trying to explain these behavioral drivers, it began with the simplest mechanism, instinct theory.
Ah, right. This was the idea that behavior is motivated by specific genetically programmed sort of innate responses shared across a species.
Exactly.
Like the examples they give. A baby chick automatically opens its mouth when the mother bird arrives, or that kangaroo rat doing its specific escape jump when it hears a rattlesnake.
Yeah, those are classic examples. And early, really influential thinkers like Freud and William James, they believed these instincts explained a lot of human action too.
But that theory hit a wall with people, didn't it?
It did. The fatal flaw when you apply it to humans is just the sheer variability and flexibility of our behavior.
Right. If it were all instinct, we'd all react the same way to the same things.
And we clearly don't. So the field realized, okay, we need something better.
And that realization that led, I think, in the 1950s to this huge shift towards drive theory. Drive theory. And this one is really rooted in biology and that crucial concept of homeostasis. Homeostasis. The body's constant effort to maintain a stable, steady internal state, right?
Exactly right. Drive theory basically suggests that when the body experiences a deficiency, like low blood sugar, that deficiency creates a drive to restore the balance.
Okay, so there's a cycle.
A very systematic cycle.
Yeah.
And needs, some kind of deprivation or deficiency leads to a drive, which is this bodily tension, think hunger or thirst. And then all your behavior is aimed at drive reduction. You eat, you drink, you satisfy the deficiency and bring the system back to, well, zero, like an internal push forcing you to act.
Okay, that makes sense for basic needs. But here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Psychologists pretty quickly found we don't just act to reduce deficiencies.
No, sometimes we actively seek out things that actually increase tension and stimulation.
Yeah, and this idea came out of research, like Harry Harlow's famous studies, right? Suggesting humans and animals have these innate needs for activity, for exploration. They called them stimulus motives.
Which brings us neatly to arousal theory. This idea suggests we don't just aim for zero tension. We're actually seeking an optimal level of stimulation.
Okay, so if we're understimulated, bored basically, we try to increase our arousal. And if we're overstimulated, stressed out, we try to dial it back down.
That's the core idea.
And what's fascinating is that optimal level is totally subjective, isn't it?
Completely. For one person, optimal arousal might mean, bungee jumping or heli skiing. Extreme stuff.
Well, for others, maybe like me, it means tackling a giant crossword puzzle or just exploring a new quiet park. I guess I'm pretty firmly in the low arousal seeking category. Finding a new bookshop is my kind of extreme sport.
And that variation is immense.
Like,
But okay, while drive theory explains that internal push from a need, we also have to look at external forces.
the pull.
Exactly. This is where incentive theory comes in.
So rather than being forced to act because we're uncomfortable inside, incentive theory argues we're pulled toward external rewards or stimuli the incentives themselves.
Precisely. The goal's attractiveness, its incentive value, is what motivates us.
That feels like a pretty major philosophical shift, actually.
It is. Drive theory kind of assumes we're fundamentally trying to escape discomfort or deficiency. Incentive theory recognizes, no, we're often driven by future goals, by aspiration, and crucially, by cultural context.
How does culture fit in?
Well, what one culture values, say, personal financial success becomes a really strong incentive. But in another culture, maybe the strongest incentive is the respect you gain by meeting your family or community obligations. The pull is defined entirely by the sort of social rules of the game in your environment.
Okay, so if incentive value is so culturally defined, then maybe the most powerful psychological incentive, at least in Western culture, is often this need for achievement.
That's a very common one, yes.
Yeah.
This is psychosocial need, develops early, and it's heavily influenced by how parents encourage things like independence and competence.
And to really understand achievement, we need to look at the two sides of motivation, right? Extrinsic versus intrinsic.
Exactly. We're driven by extrinsic motivation. That's the desire for external rewards like money, good grades, praise, the usual stuff,
But then there's intrinsic motivation.
which is often much more powerful. That's the desire for internal gratification, just the sheer self-satisfaction you get from mastering a task or achieving a goal for its own sake.
You'd think that intrinsic desire would always be the stronger one, wouldn't you? But it feels like in any situation where achievement is possible, there's this battle going on.
There is. It's the desire to achieve success, what we call achievement motivation, constantly wrestling with the desire to avoid failure or avoidance motivation.
And they lead to different behaviors.
Definitely. Someone dominated by achievement motivation, they tend to take calculated risks. Challenges that offer a high potential for success, even if failure is a possibility.
Okay.
But someone dominated by avoidance motivation, they often choose tasks that either guarantee success because they're just too easy, or tasks that are so ridiculously hard that, well, failure can't possibly be held against them.
Which really limits their potential for actual success, doesn't it?
It inherently does, yes.
So to try and structure all these different internal and psychological needs, we often turn to Abraham Maslow and his famous hierarchy of needs.
Ah, yes, Maslow's pyramid. It's a model that attempts to put some kind of order to human needs, suggesting we progress upward from the most basic requirements.
It's got such a great intuitive appeal. We start with the foundation, right? The physiological needs, basic survival.
Food, water, shelter.
Then move up to safety needs, then love and belongingness needs, then esteem needs, and finally, right at the top, self-actualization, achieving your full potential.
That's the classic 5-level model. It's fantastic because it makes sense on the surface.
But it's not quite that neat, is it? Our sources point out that this fixed order is actually a major limitation. You don't always need perfect safety before you seek friendship, for instance.
That's absolutely right. The order might not be fixed for everyone or even for the same person at different times. And maybe even more complexly, a single action often satisfies multiple needs at once.
Like going to university.
Exactly. You might be securing future safety through job prospects, gaining esteem through achievement, satisfying belongingness needs with new friends, and pursuing self-actualization through learning all at the same time.
Wow.
And we should also mention Maslow himself later expanded the model. He added levels like cognitive needs, the need to know and understand aesthetic needs for beauty and order, and even self-transcendence.
Self-transcendence, what's that?
It's basically striving for meaning beyond your own self, often involving spirituality or helping others achieve their own potential. It's looking outward.
Okay, so Maslow takes us pretty high up the hierarchy, but let's maybe circle back down to the ground floor for a minute, because those really basic physiological drives, like hunger, they're driven by that same fundamental principle we talked about earlier, right? Homeostasis.
Exactly. The body seeking balance. And while, yeah, we feel hunger pangs in our stomach, the really sophisticated system that controls when we start and stop eating, that resides in the brain.
Right. Specific brain structures acting like on and off switches.
Pretty much. The hypothalamus is key here. You've got the lateral hypothalamus, which seems to be the on switch for initiating eating, and the ventromedial hypothalamus, which signals satiety, the off switch. It's regulated by hormones and nutrient levels in the blood.
And this kind of precise regulation helps explain why managing weight long-term can feel like such a constant, difficult battle for some people.
It really does. Obesity, at its core, is caused by a calorie imbalance, often influenced by genetics, and something called your basal metabolic rate, or BMR.
That's just how much energy your body burns at rest,
Yeah.
just keeping the lights on.
Exactly. But there's this powerful built-in mechanism that fights back against conscious efforts to restrict calories, especially significant weight loss.
And that's the set point theory.
That's it. The idea is your brain mechanisms work to regulate your body weight around a genetically predetermined set point. So if you start losing weight, your brain might perceive that as a threat to homeostasis.
And it fights back.
It responds by decreasing your BMR, making you burn fewer calories at rest, trying to push your body weight back up towards that set point. The key takeaway is that your body's automatic system is actively working, sometimes very successfully, against your conscious goal.
Wow. And when that intense biological and psychological struggle with weight intersects with really pervasive social pressure, especially that unrealistic Western cultural emphasis on thinness, that's when we see things like eating disorders emerge.
Sadly, yes. Our sources touched on two severe conditions: anorexia nervosa, which involves self-starvation and intense fear of gaining weight and dangerously low body weight. It carries a shockingly high mortality rate, something like 5–20%.
That's terrifying. And the other,
Bulimia nervosa. This is characterized by cycles of binge eating, consuming huge amounts of food, followed by purging, like self-induced vomiting or using laxatives. This carries serious risks too, like esophageal damage or tooth enamel decay.
and the sources were pretty clear that a major contributing factor, especially for young women, is that cultural pressure for thinness, amplified now by social media.
Absolutely. The fact that these disorders are far less common in cultures that don't have that specific, often unattainable body standard really highlights how our environment and culture can drive dysfunction, even in our most basic biological drives like eating.
Which is actually a perfect segue. We've seen how culture shapes drives like achievement and even contributes to eating disorders. Let's shift to another fundamental psychological state that's profoundly shaped by culture,
Emotions.
from drives to feelings.
So let's define emotions. They're basically feeling states, right?
Yeah.
And they seem to have three core components. First, there's the bodily arousal, that nervous system activation, the racing heart, the sweaty palms.
The physical reaction. Second, the cognitions. That's the subjective experience, the thoughts, the judgments, the labels we apply to that feeling.
Like thinking I'm scared or I'm happy.
And third, the expressed behaviors. The outward signs: running away, laughing, crying, frowning.
And these feeling states, they aren't just random. Darwin was one of the first to suggest they have an adaptive purpose. They evolved to help us survive.
How so?
Well, think about it. Fear mobilizes our defenses, gets us ready to fight or flee. Anger might help us secure resources or territory. Joy helps facilitate social bonds. They communicate important information, both to ourselves and others.
And this idea led to research suggesting some expressions are universal, like Paul Ekman's work.
Yes, Ekman's cross-cultural research famously identified 6 basic facial expressions that seem to be recognized pretty much everywhere: anger, fear, disgust, sadness, happiness, and surprise.
But like with incentives, culture complicates the picture here too, doesn't it? Even if the basic expression is recognized.
It really does. How and when we actually display those emotions is heavily governed by what psychologists call display rules. These are cultural customs.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, the sources mention subtle differences even in something as simple as a smile. Depending on the culture, the right way to smile might differ slightly, whether you just draw the corners of your lips up or pull them back and up, showing more lower teeth. Culture tells us not just what we might feel, but often how we're supposed to show it, or even if we should show it.
Right. Okay, this brings us to one of the biggest debates in this whole field. Which comes first? The physical reaction or the conscious feeling? Do we feel sad and then cry, or do we cry and that makes us feel sad?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
The first major theory was the James Lange theory, and it makes a really radical proposition.
Which is?
It says we become aware of our physiological response first, and the emotion actually follows the bodily reaction.
Wait, hold on. So if I stumble upon a bear in the woods, I don't run because I'm afraid. I feel fear because my heart starts pounding and I start trembling. That feels incredibly backwards.
It feels counterintuitive, absolutely. Their key observation was that different emotions often seem to have distinct patterns of physiological response.
Yeah.
The idea was the body reacts automatically, reflexively, and our conscious mind is essentially just labeling that physical reaction after the fact.
Okay. What was the counter-argument?
The big challenge came from the Cannon-Bard theory. They argued, look, the body often reacts too slowly to account for the speed of emotional feeling. And also, different emotions sometimes cause very similar physical arousal patterns. How could the body tell them apart?
So what did they propose instead?
They said the subjective experience of the emotion, the feeling of fear, and the bodily reaction happen pretty much simultaneously. They accompany each other, but one doesn't necessarily cause the other. They're both triggered by the same stimulus, processed by the brain at the same time.
Okay, two competing ideas. Where did the field land? Is there a model that tries to bring these together?
Yes, the contemporary model that really synthesizes insights from both is the two-factor model of emotion, developed by Schachter and Singer.
Two factors. What are they?
This model asserts that emotion requires two essential components happening together. First, physiological arousal, just a general state of activation, and second, cognitive appraisal.
Cognitive appraisal meaning labeling it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Labeling the source of that arousal. So when you feel generally aroused or agitated, you instinctively look to your environment, to the context to figure out why you're feeling that way.
Ah, okay, so your mind appraises the situation.
Right, and it labels that general physiological excitement as fear if you see the bear, or maybe joy or excitement if you see your best friend approaching unexpectedly. The arousal is general, the cognitive label makes it specific.
That makes so much more sense. It really shows why context is everything in how we interpret our feelings. And speaking of fear specifically, our sources mention the brain actually has like two different tracks for processing it, the dual pathway model.
Yes, that's fascinating work,
Yeah.
mainly from Joseph Ledoux. Evolution has basically given us two parallel defensive systems. Sensory information about a potential threat travels along a slower, more analytical high road up to the cerebral cortex.
For careful evaluation, like, is that really a threat or just the wind?
Exactly. Conscious, considered processing. But simultaneously, some of that sensory information takes the super fast low road, a shortcut that goes directly to the amygdala, the brain's sort of fear hub.
Bypassing thinking part.
Bypassing the cortex initially, yes. This allows for an immediate, rapid, almost reflexive response, like jumping back or flinching, before you've even consciously registered what the threat is. It's the react first, ask questions later pathway.
Wow. Okay, so we've really journeyed quite a distance here. From those simple deficiency drives rooted in homeostasis, through the culture-bound pull of incentives, all the way to this complex dual-track intersection of cognition and bodily reaction and emotion.
It's a lot to cover. And tying all this complex theory back to you, the listener, perhaps the greatest practical application lies in this idea of emotional intelligence, often called EI.
How does that connect?
Well, that core finding of the two-factor model, the idea that we label our arousal based on context, that's really the entire basis of EI. It's the ability to recognize and manage emotions, both of yourself and in others. It starts with awareness.
And our sources highlighted, I think, 5 main characteristics of EI.
That's right. Knowing your emotions, being self-aware,
Yeah.
managing them effectively, motivating yourself, which ties back to intrinsic drivers, recognizing emotions in other people, empathy, and finally, helping others handle their emotions, managing relationships.
These all sound like skills built on that idea of recognizing and maybe reappraising that initial, often general arousal.
Precisely. And if you want concrete tools, say, to increase happiness, the positive psychology founder Martin Seligman offers exercises that really leverage intrinsic motivation and that cognitive appraisal piece.
Like what?
Like ending your day by writing down 3 blessings, 3 things that went well and why. That simple practice of conscious, positive reflection is a form of deliberate cognitive appraisal, or doing a gratitude visit.
And managing difficult emotions like anger. Does that use the same principle?
Absolutely. To manage anger effectively, the advice is often to, first, review the evidence. Is your cognitive appraisal of the situation actually accurate? Practice adaptive thinking. And consciously try to oppose anger with empathy.
Yeah.
You're essentially trying to interrupt that fast emotional low road and force the slower, more rational high road to take control.
It all comes back to that interplay between the body's reaction and the mind's interpretation.
It really does. And, given how easily our behavior and our feelings can be influenced, think about the set point theory subtly regulating our weight, or that James Lange idea suggesting we might cry before we even consciously feel sad. It really makes you wonder.
What's that?
Well, how often are the whys behind what we do truly a conscious cognitive choice versus maybe a more hardwired biological reaction that we only put a label on after the fact?
That's a deep question. And if culture shapes our incentive values so profoundly, what's the real line between those extrinsic rewards we chase and the intrinsic fulfillment we seek, especially in the complex world of work and our big life goals? Where does one end and the other begin?
Exactly. Definitely something to keep mulling over.
Indeed. Well, that's our deep dive for today. Thanks for unpacking it with us.